Hello there and welcome to our nightly news program coming to you live on All 24 News from Algiers. I'm your host Karim Fazakari and these are today's top stories. Algerian and Iranian president discussed via phone the situation in Palestine. They review mechanisms for consolidating and strengthening bilateral relations and they agree in principle to exchange visits between them in the future. On the fourth day of the Jewish holiday, the occupation turns the courtyards of Al-Aqsa Mosque into military camps and the Palestinian presidency warns against the escalation. Also ahead in our news, social and political tension in Morocco exacerbates and 60 cities are rising up against high prices, oppression and the restriction of freedoms. Also coming up, China simulates precision strikes against key targets on Taiwan and its surroundings waters during a second day of military drills. Hello again and welcome to the program. First off in our news, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune agreed with his Iranian counterpart Mr. Ibrahim Raisi to exchange visits in the future. This was during a telephone conversation held between the two presidents on Sunday. According to a press release from the Presidency of the Republic, the two presidents exchanged their best wishes on the occasion of the holy month of Ramadan. The same source indicated that the two presidents reviewed the state of bilateral relations and agreed to promote and strengthen them in the political and economic fields in the best interest of the two peoples. To a different story now, Zionist forces continue their violence against Palestinians in Al-Aqsa Mosque for the fourth day since the start of the Passover ceremony in Al-Burqa Square. Zionist soldiers and border guards have stormed Al-Aqsa compound and set several barriers and checkpoints, which was described as a move to turn Al-Aqsa into a military camp. Here's Osama Ayadi with more.
Zionist occupation attacks continue against Al-Aqsa Mosque and Palestinian worshippers without interruption and in all forms. Provocations expanded during the fourth day of the Jewish Passover holiday to turn the mosque's courtyards into military camps. The old city of Al-Quds witnessed a state of high tension in light of the strict military measures imposed by the occupation forces on the eve of the festive ceremony for the Jews in Al-Burqa Square, after the occupation authorities set barriers and checkpoints within the walls of the town.
Groups of Israeli Jewish settlers have been breaking into the compound in groups under the pretext of celebrating the Jewish holiday of Passover.
The occupation police emptied the streets of the old city from young men in preparation for storming. The settlers also prevented young men from entering Al-Aqsa Mosque and took them out towards the Lion's Gate at a time when members of the border guards assaulted Palestinian citizens at the gates of Al-Aqsa and prevented them from entering the mosque.
Al-Aqsa Mosque, with all its spaces, interior and sky, and the exclusive right of Muslims alone, and all occupation measures in the mosque, are null and will not be accepted by the Palestinian people stationed in the Arab and Islamic nation.
These measures paved the way for massive incursions by Zionist settlers. The Islamic Endowment Department in Al-Quds reported that 450 settlers stormed the courtyards of Al-Aqsa Mosque in groups from the Western Gate in a provocative step and a violation of sanctity of religious sites. Escalating provocations which came after Al-Aqsa Mosque was subjected during the past days to attacks by the occupation forces, targeting worshippers and Islamic retreats inside Al-Qibli prayer hall with fire and tear gas.
The Palestinian Authority warned on Sunday that Zionist provocations will turn Al-Aqsa Mosque complex in occupied East Al-Quds into a battlefield. This comes as violence escalated across the Palestinian territories after Zionist police forcibly removed worshippers from inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex last week. The spokesman of the Palestinian presidency, Nabil Abu Radian, held the Zionist entity fully responsible for any potential deterioration of the situation in the occupied territories.
Palestinian presidency rejects the Zionist occupation's provocations against the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque and warns that these provocations will turn the courtyards of Al-Aqsa into a battlefield, which will lead to a serious deterioration of the situations.
In a different development, Zionist jets hit Syrian military targets early on Sunday morning, and a further escalation between the Zionist entity and the Syrian army after violence flared again following cross-border exchanges of fire during the week. Despite the cross-border fire, state media in Syria reported explosions in the vicinity of the capital, Damascus, as Zionist forces continued to hit Syrian territory after 6 rockets were fired overnight towards the Golan Heights. Reports stated that artillery and drone strikes hit the rocket launchers and were followed by airstrikes against a Syrian army compound, military radar systems, and artillery posts. The head of the opposition in the Zionist entity, Yair Lapid, held the Netanyahu government responsible for the tense situation at Al-Aqsa Mosque, accusing the Zionist Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, of trying to ignite the Middle East. Lapid said on Sunday that the Zionist police's violence against Al-Aqsa Islamic seclusion indicates the government's irresponsibility, noting that the scene expresses the repercussions of the assumption of power by the most extremists within the entity. Moving on now, Algerian Speaker of National People's Assembly, the chairman of the lower house of parliament, Mr. Ibrahim Boughali, called for an emergency meeting on the situation in Palestine in his capacity as the president of the Councils of Member States Union of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Mr. Boughali called for the emergency remote meeting of the presidential Troika and the Palestine Committee on Monday, April 10, 2023, in view of the recent blatant attacks of the Zionist occupation. Iran's foreign ministry said Sunday that a delegation would visit Saudi Arabia by Friday to pave the way for reopening its diplomatic missions there, following a similar move by Riyadh. The announcement comes a day after a Saudi delegation arrived in Tehran on a similar diplomatic trip and follows a historic meeting between the two Gulf countries' foreign ministers in China.
We're expecting a foreign ministry delegation to visit Saudi Arabia by Friday. 2 separate delegations will go to Riyadh and Jeddah ahead of reopening Iran's embassy and consulate, respectively.
Houthi-run media said that Saudi and Omani envoys had arrived in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, to negotiate a permanent ceasefire deal with Iran-aligned Houthi officials and end a 9-year-old conflict there. Here's Zahra Farjani with more.
Saudi negotiators met with Houthi officials in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a on Sunday to hammer out the final details of a long-term truce that could pave the way towards a lasting peace after 8 years of war. Head of the Houthi negotiating delegation says adhering to the firm position on the issue is a principle that cannot be abandoned, stressing that lifting the siege and stopping the attacks, the exit of foreign forces from the country, as well as reconstruction, will be the most important files for which representatives of the Houthi group will plead with the Saudi and Omani delegations.
We have arrived today in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, along with our brotherly Omani delegation, in continuation of our efforts to achieve a just peace for a continuous path, whether the meetings that took place in Muscat or in Sana'a. We're continuing making these efforts in this context. First, we affirm our firm position adhering to our just cause, as affirmed by the leader in more than one speech and position. Our just demands are to stop the aggression and lift the siege completely, to pay the salaries of all Yemeni employees from the entitlements of oil and gas revenues, as well as the exit of foreign forces from Yemen, compensation and reconstruction.
The prisoner exchange deal is seen as a progress in negotiations and as an effort aiming at a longer truce. The previous one, which lasted only for 6 months, was a point of accusations between Yemeni government and the Houthis for its failure.
We are in this round. Through our meetings with the leadership, we will conduct discussions, and we are still adhering to these demands, considering that they are legitimate and just rights.
Certainly, hopes are high in Yemen about the negotiations' outcome to end the conflict, at a time when the consultations launched months ago have made positive pace, and in light of official Yemeni support for the most prominent agreements made earlier.
Kuwait issue an Emiri decree to form a new government headed by Sheikh Ahmed Nawaf al-Ahmed al-Sabah. According to the Kuwaiti news outlets, Sheikh Talal al-Khalid al-Sabah has been reappointed as first Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Interior and Acting Minister of Defense, while Sheikh Salem Abdullah al-Jaber al-Sabah was retained in his position as Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Sheikh Ahmed Nawaf al-Sabah was reassigned to form the new government by an Emiri order issued last March by the Emir Deputy and Crown Prince Sheikh Mish'al al-Ahmed al-Jaber al-Sabah. Still with Morocco, the US agency Fitch Ratings lowered Morocco's economic growth forecast for the current year due to the acceleration of inflation, monetary policy tightening, and the deterioration in the agricultural sector. Fitch reduced its growth estimates in the kingdom from 3.4% previously to 1.8% on the back of a deterioration of agricultural production by about 15%. While the non-agricultural sector slowed down to 2.4% by the end of the current year. To neighboring Tunisia now, Tunisian President Mr. Kais Saied confirmed on Sunday that the parliament Tunisians aspired to head the country and embody their will be achieved today. President Saied supervised the procession commemorating the 85th anniversary of Martyrs' Day, in which he noted that Tunisia will not forget its martyrs and will not deny their blood. To neighboring Libya now, in his speech at the fourth cabinet meeting, the Libyan Prime Minister Abdul Hamid al-Dbeiba, in the presence of the head of the Presidential Council, Mohammed al-Menfi, has reaffirmed the government's will to create suitable conditions to end the transitional stages through fair and impartial elections. More with Salman Sib.
After a period of political stagnation in Libya due to several reflections, perhaps the most prominent of which is the failure to reach an agreement that satisfies the conflicting parties to prepare a constitutional basis leading to elections, Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeiba arranged his cabinet's fourth meeting for 2023 in Misrata, during which the head of the National Unity Government pledged to continue his commitment to creating appropriate conditions for holding elections and ending the transitional stages that have been going on since 2011.
We continue our commitment to serving Libyans and creating the appropriate conditions to end the transitional stages through fair and impartial elections for all the Libyan people. The current stage in Libya requires that everyone continue their adherence to the option of peace and power.
Meanwhile, the president of the Presidential Council, Mohammed al-Menfi, said that his council is ready to assist the government in its effort to ease the sufferings of citizens, adding that it must focus on creating a stable environment through which elections can be reached in the near future.
This meeting aims at erasing the suffering of citizens and providing services, and the main goal that we all focus on in order to create a stable environment through which we can reach the elections as soon as possible.
For his part, UN envoy Abdoulaye Batili called in his speech at the meeting of the Joint Military Commissions 5+5 in Benghazi on military and security leaders to show commitment to ensuring a suitable environment for elections.
This meeting tonight is a symbol of unity and a symbol of a new Libya, a sovereign Libya. I reiterate the call I made to the mayors and call upon you to play your part in enabling the holding of free and fair elections this year. I would like to build on our meeting today and bring further progress to feature in my upcoming briefing to the Security Council scheduled in about 10 days from now.
Indeed, the current stage requires everyone to adhere to peace option, and there is a need to establish a stable situation in which the opportunities for construction and development that enhance the chances of success of the elections are strengthened and the results are accepted by all parties.
A residential building in France's port city of Marseille collapsed in a loud explosion early on Sunday, followed by a fire deep within the rubble that hindered rescue efforts. Therefore, more than 100 firefighters were trying to put out blazes under huge piles of rubble in a slow and delicate operation aimed at keeping firefighters safe and trying not to harm people potentially trapped. And according to officials, 2 neighboring buildings were partially brought down and one was in danger of collapsing, created a double challenge, which made the French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin visit the scene. Police in the German port city of Hamburg warned locals on Sunday of possible toxins in the air after a fire at a storage facility. Authorities said the fire began around 4 a.m. in Rothenburgsort, just a few kilometers southeast of central Hamburg, and that the smoke cloud was moving in the direction of the city center. According to a police spokesman, 140 people were evacuated, and it is not yet possible to say how dangerous the situation is, but no injuries have been reported. The Ukrainian military administration revealed that it had recorded a Russian missile attack on the city at dawn on Sunday, which partially destroyed a residential building and damaged nearby buildings. Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed that its snipers eliminated a hostile reconnaissance group on the axis of southern Donetsk, while the Ukrainian Deputy Minister of Defense said that the Russian forces are continuing their attempts to advance toward the city and its control despite incurring great losses. Moving on now, Chinese firefighters, jets and warships have been simulating precision strikes on Taiwan. China has deployed dozens of jets and vessels surrounding the island in a second straight day of military drills. More with Sofian Kinturi.
Chinese fighter jets and warships simulated strikes on Taiwan on Sunday as they encircled the island during the second straight day of military drills, launched in response to his president meeting the U.S. House Speaker. The exercises sparked condemnation from Taipei and calls for restraint from Washington. TAP joins forward the 3-day operation, which includes rehearsing an encirclement of Taiwan.
This is an announcement from the vessel 10,079 of the Republic of China's Coast Guards. You're now seriously jeopardizing regional peace and stability. Immediately change direction and leave.
Taiwan's defense ministry said it had detected 9 Chinese warships and 58 aircraft around the island, adding that along with warships, there was a mix of fighter jets and bombers.
Reading the movements of the Chinese Communist rocket force, the nation's military also has a close grasp through the Joint Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance System, and air defense forces remain on high alert.
Voices of protesters raised in Taiwan saying that Tsai has sparked the conflict and brought war, and is using the American media to achieve her goals, rejecting her visit to Washington altogether.
We all know how Tsai Ing-wen made a fool of herself while in transit in New York. At the Reagan Library, her speech is cancelled. There was no federal officer to greet her when she got off the plane. The most ridiculous thing is to discuss Taiwan's betrayal without daring to tell us.
In retaliation for Taiwanese President Tsai visited the United States, Beijing started 3 days of military drills on the island. China has responded to the US-Taiwan provocations twice now. It's important to remember that the first act of provocation was Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island despite Chinese warnings.
U.S. President Joe Biden returned to the White House on Sunday from a weekend trip to Camp David. Biden's return to Washington, D.C. comes after yet another in a spat of mass shootings. 3 people were killed and 11 others wounded late Saturday, April 8th night in Philadelphia, in the latest case of gun violence in the United States after recent massacres in Texas, New York, and Oklahoma, where dozens died. Biden on Thursday called on Congress to ban assault weapons, expand background checks, and implement other gun control measures to address the string of mass shootings. Also on Sunday, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned the United States in an interview broadcast that Russia would strike new targets if the West supplied longer-range missiles to Ukraine for use in high-precision mobile rocket systems. And finally in our news, Taraweeh prayer is a special prayer Muslims perform only in the month of Ramadan. During this special period, worshippers travel long distances to go to precise mosques where imams have attractive voice and performance. More details in this report.
Abu Hurairah narrated that the Messenger of Allah said, "Whoever establishes prayers during the nights of Ramadan faithfully out of sincere faith and hoping to attain Allah's rewards, not for showing off, all his past sins will be forgiven."
Taraweeh prayer is a special prayer Muslims perform only in the month of Ramadan. It is a sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, which means that it was his practice to perform Taraweeh, and Muslims are encouraged to do likewise, but it is not an obligatory. Worshippers travel long distances to frequent specific mosques because of the attractive voice and performance of imams during prayers, many of whom have become famous in their countries or regions for their recitation.
Voice has an impact on the spiritual atmosphere. I am a Tawjihi student. When I attend Taraweeh prayer here at the great companion Abdullah bin Salam Mosque, I pray with great reverence, more so than praying at the mosques. My house is located far from this mosque, but I've also become attached to the Imam's nice voice and this mosque after coming here.
At Abdullah bin Salam Mosque in Amman, Eid prays side by side with many worshippers who have come a long way just to listen to the mosque's Imam.
There are 5 mosques between my house and this mosque. Many worshippers, including me, insist on going to this mosque and to any mosque that has an imam who has a unique and strong voice. Therefore, we need an imam with a strong voice.
The unique voice and Quran recitation of the Jordanian Imam, Ahmed al-Harasis, is what pushes worshippers to travel a long distance to attend his Ramadan night prayers, even though there are mosques located near their homes.
We know that the voice has an impact on people's souls. Even the Prophet, peace be upon him, was affected by the nice voice when he listened to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. He told him, "I listened to your recitation yesterday. You're provided a muzmara, the Dawood." Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was happy when he learned about this news and said, "If I knew about that, I would have beautified it even more."
Muslims read and listen to the Quran more frequently during Ramadan, as well as attend a nightly prayer known as Taraweeh that occurs every evening during the holy month.
Well, that's all we have for now. For more, our social media platforms and our website are always under your service. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for tuning in. Till next time, have a good one.